Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Access Vikings. I'm Emily Leiker, joined by Andrew Krammer, both of us of the Minnesota Star Tribune. We are officially in tanning via football practice season. We spent an hour and a half out at TCO Performance Center in Eagan today for day one of rookie minicamp, which will be our only look of the few days they're out there doing that. But Andrew, we were there, like I said, for 90 minutes, got to see a lot of stuff going on. We talked to some folks after. I guess just what were your one or two biggest takeaways or standout things that you heard?
Yeah, definitely is that the Vikings rookie class is small. It looks a lot smaller when it's 5 picks, but it looks even smaller when it's just 5 players running around on the field. They've got 20 tryout guys. They've got the 19 undrafted guys that they brought in. But Emily, we know when we've talked all offseason, this is such a veteran roster. It's one that it doesn't have a lot of openings for guys to jump in and contribute right away. So I think what stands out to me is that obviously Donovan Jackson's going to have a huge runway and opportunity here. They're going to talk about a competition at left guard with Blake Brandel, but he was out there on the field today just with other fellow rookies and undrafted guys. There's not a whole lot offensive and defensive linemen are going to do this time of year, but Kevin O'Connell said it's really about getting those guys ready come Monday when they can join the entire team on the field and start working on the intricacies and the building blocks for them to get them ready for when they finally strap on pads come late July, whenever they start resuming actual football. But this is very different from last year where it was J.J. McCarthy, it was Dallas Turner. It kind of felt more like, I don't want to say a youth movement, but it certainly felt a little bit more like, oh, these guys, they've got some youth. And Mekhi Blackman obviously was coming back as well, trying to enter his second year. And so they had a little bit more kind of feeling of that than they do this year. And so to me, it's just more about how there's really a select few group of guys here that could jump up and contribute for a team that's trying to build a veteran core around its young quarterback in J.J. McCarthy.
A little bit of an aside, because you brought up McCarthy. I did see at least one person ask if the Vikings would have, or did we think they might have considered, was there any way to get JJ out there during rookie minicamp because he didn't play most of last season? I'm not quite sure the rules there. Andrew, what was your thought on that?
Yeah, they technically could if he was still rehabbing, and that's all a technical thing. The team has said he's done rehabbing, but whether that's technically true or just practically true, that could obviously blur in the lines. If JJ's still going in the training room for any reason after workouts to get monitoring or whatever, I don't know if that could fall into the NFL rules of he's a rehabbing player, therefore he's eligible to. But honestly, I was talking to somebody with the team about this today. How much is it really worth the risk of putting him out there around guys who are flying around, as Kevin O'Connell just said at his presser, guys that are flying around trying to make a team, trying to impress people? Why even risk having a quarterback who, yes, would wear a red jersey, say no contact, you can't touch him, but accidents happen, guys get hurt in red jerseys all the time. So to me, it just didn't seem like it would be worth rushing him. But again, the team has also maintained that he's done rehabbing. And if that's actually the case technically and practically, then no, he's not allowed to be out there, because that only includes, I believe, rehabbing players, and the quarterbacks have to come from they have to be rookies or have to be tryout players or whatever. And then that's why JJ was out there, obviously, last year after he got drafted.
Right. Well, and I think, too, everything we've heard indicates that JJ's been taking reps for months now, from like the second he was able to start working on a field again, and that they feel pretty comfortable with the amount of reps he's been able to take individually and even with some of the team's receivers and stuff like that. So I don't think the Vikings are in a place where they are necessarily worried, like, does JJ have enough reps since coming back from his injury so far?
Yeah, O'Connell's talked about some of the rehab sessions that he'll obviously spend all day or all morning in the weight room or something, and then he'll get on the field. And he wasn't allowed to be around coaches, but he could be monitored by the training staff and the strength staff. And he said, I don't think we'll ever ask him to throw the amount of times he was throwing in some of those training sessions. So they're not too worried about the arm reps or anything like that. And again, this is not full team. This is not 11 on 11. This is not getting your play action drops and your footwork and really working on everything he will be working on come OTAs later this month. And so that's really what I think everybody's excited around the Vikings facility, looking to see how he looks once the veterans and that full team can be together again.
The Vikings do have two quarterbacks going through rookie minicamp, though. Obviously, undrafted free agent Max Brosmer, who was Minnesota's quarterback this past season, and then also Zach Zabrowski, who is a local kid. He went to Central Missouri, but he's there on a tryout basis. We watched a bit of Brosmer. We were over by the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. Definitely some shaky moments, maybe a couple moments that looked good. He was getting a lot of coaching from KOC directly, I think we can say. Andrew, you talked with him, heard from him a little bit. Just what did he say about getting to stick in Minnesota, join the Vikings? We haven't heard from him since this came to be.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear him talk about just kind of waiting all day Saturday, as so many guys do when you don't know if you're going to be drafted or when you're going to be drafted. And he was asked a good question about, did you get to the point where you wanted to be undrafted? Because at that point, you get your choice of where you want to go. It's just up to all the teams that want to add you. And when you're or obviously if you go 6th, 7th round, something like that, a team you might not want to go to can pick you. So Max, delicately dodged that question and just said, I think this ended up how it should be or how it's supposed to be. But he didn't mince words when he talked about wanting to go out there and play for Kevin O'Connell and choosing to come to a team that has incredible people. The Vikings are obviously rated one of the top teams by the Players Union every year, which asks its own players to vote on their own teams. And the Vikings always get high regards for how they treat their players and their families. So he knew that coming into it. The Gophers coaching staff is very close to the Vikings coaching staff. Both teams visit each other fairly often. And so he had heard a lot of good things about Minnesota and the Vikings. And so that, I think, guided his decision, as did $250,000 guaranteed, which was among the most the Vikings had guaranteed any of their undrafted rookies this year. So they clearly won a bidding war to keep him around and chose him to be that fourth quarterback, and a guy that really has all the intangibles for whatever he might lack physically or tangible wise.
Yeah, and from the Vikings side of it, KOC mentioned today that he didn't just see Brosmer at this year's pro day when he was an active participant, but he got to see him last year too, because there's the rule about underclassmen being able to throw and help out their receivers. So Brosmer had transferred to Minnesota by the time last year's pro day happened. So we got to see him throwing at 2 pro days and had developed a little bit, at least a relationship in the sense of he had seen him throw before and maybe seen the development from one year to the next.
Yeah, Kevin kind of, obviously he said I couldn't see him in person because Gophers obviously play, fairly similar schedule to the Vikings, busy in the fall. But he said, yeah, the 2 times seeing him at the pro day certainly helped. And I think just seeing him in that setting too, Max Brosmer, he impressed a lot of people. You heard a lot of good things from NFL evaluators who saw him both in 2024 and then now in 2025 this past March, because he just has a leadership about him and a quality that obviously led to him continuing to climb like this. So it'll be interesting. O'Connell keeps talking about how happy they are with that quarterback room, but it is one devoid of a ton of NFL experience. Obviously, Sam Howell's the most experienced of the bunch. So it's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out.
Notable name that Max was throwing to in camp today was Montego Moss, who is one of the sons of Vikings legendary wide receiver Randy Moss. You also talked with him, Andrew. What did he just have to say about landing with the Vikings, I guess? How purposeful was that for him, or meaningful, I guess, and his perspective on playing where his dad played?
Yeah, he was very honest. That's what struck me about Montego, because he's the youngest of 2 sons for Randy, and both of them obviously have at least had a cup of coffee in the NFL. Thaddeus went undrafted to Washington, but he actually signed, whereas Montego's just he's still looking for that first contract. He has not signed. He's trying out, as you mentioned. And he was asked about picking the Vikings, and he said, to be completely honest, this was my only option. He said, I would have picked here even if my dad never played for here and if it was a team he never played for, because I just want to keep this dream alive. And so he's just desperate. He's trying to catch on any which way he can. And he said it was a great feeling putting on the NFL uniform and wearing the Vikings purple. But he said an even better feeling would be sticking around and getting to stay longer than 2 or 3 days. So it's really a tough situation for him and for guys in that spot. And O'Connell talked about how it's not impossible. And that's kind of part of the message he's trying to impart on these guys, is saying that Adam Thielen was a tryout guy. CJ Ham was a tryout guy. A lot of people have come that route and somehow earned a contract for the summer and then built from there and managed to stick around. So they try to impart on them that this matters, but in reality, it's a very limited 3-day evaluation. Again, it's not full team stuff. It's not full contact. You got to impress people on passing drills. And the Vikings have 13 wide receivers under contract, including a third rounder they drafted in Ty Felton and 4 undrafted guys they've already signed, not named Montego Moss. So a lot is stacked against him, but it's a great story because this is the only team that's giving him a shot, and he's got this weekend to prove it. We should also mention that he updated, Emily, you wrote the story for us on Randy's cancer diagnosis last December, and Montego said that he's feeling a lot better. He's actually training with me. He helped me prepare for this moment. Training the past month, running routes with me. Randy was playing quarterback and throwing passes to him. So that bile duct cancer that you had reported on for us at StarTribune.com seems to be at least well in remission for Randy.
Yeah, which is obviously good to hear. And Kevin O'Connell had mentioned that was kind of the last time he spoke to Randy, but figured that with Montego being around might be a conversation soon, potentially, or just some contact there. Andrew, you mentioned obviously that wide receiver is one of those positions that's probably the hardest to break into on the Vikings roster at this point, potentially, if not top 3 or whatever. But I'm talked with Gavin Bartholomew, writing about Gavin Bartholomew, the final pick that the Vikings made in the draft, tight end out of Pittsburgh. Tight end's a spot where there is room for a contributor to come into that room. Really, they need a tight end 3, someone who can contribute right away. They drafted Bartholomew. They also added Ben Yurasek from Georgia and then Bryson Nesbitt from North Carolina as undrafted free agents. So O'Connell tried to make it out like, hey, this is still a competition between all 3 of them. You know, like the difference between where Bartholomew was drafted and those undrafted free agent guys, like they were probably all pretty closely ranked on the Vikings board. But I think I would be shocked if it didn't go Bartholomew's way for a number of reasons. The funniest of which being is that I think he's almost a 1-for-1 comp for Johnny Munt in terms of personality and some of the stuff going on there.
Well, you had mentioned too, obviously you talked to some people in Gavin's life. So what does he bring beyond the mullet? We did verify that he's got the mullet. We saw it in person. So there's no more speculation about that. But what does he bring beyond the nice head of lettuce, as they say?
Yeah, I talked to Pitt coach Pat Narduzzi, and his big thing was Gavin's big yards after catch guy. Like he was the one that they turned to pretty quickly as like okay, we're going to toss to him on a short yardage play. And then we know that he has the potential to go pick up 5, 7, 10, 15 yards. There's a great highlight from, I think, his sophomore season, 2022. They were playing Tennessee and he catches like a 20-yard pass and then hurdles a Tennessee defender to take it another 37 yards to the house. Like this is a guy that can jump over guys, will take the physical contact with guys, which I think is something the Vikings need, right? I mean, Aaron Jones, I think, led them last year, understandably, as running back, but he had, I want to say just over, let's see, I have the number somewhere. Yeah, so Jones had averaged 8.4 yards after catch last year per reception, followed by Josh Oliver, who had 6.1, and then Munt had 5.1 average yards after catch. Gavin's average through 4 years at Pitt was 6.9 yards after catch. So the Vikings are looking to up that number there. They were just below 5. I think they were at 4.9 average for the team last year. The top is like 6.2. I don't remember what team had that, but like that's a slim margin in terms of like a stat category. And the Vikings are, I think, just looking to even just break into that 5-point realm. And it feels like Gavin's someone that could do it for them.
Yeah, especially if he can be an all-around guy too, which is something they value so much, not just having somebody who can be a big slot receiver or something like that, somebody who can be in line, block. And this team wants to run the ball more, as we keep talking about. So if Gavin can earn that spot as a number 3 tight end, and we know how often these guys get hurt and miss time. And we know that the kind of role they'd envisioned for a guy like Nick Muse, who ends up getting plucked by the Eagles last offseason, could have been like this Johnny Munt type role. So I know these positions usually take a year or two at tight end to kind of develop and become regular NFL contributors because of all the different things they're asked to do in the run game and the pass game. But if he proves to be a quick study, I don't see why he couldn't have a decent shot, because you looked up the numbers too, the amount of 12 personnel they play. I imagine, it was a lot last year, and I imagine it's going to be a lot this year too, understanding how much they want to run the ball.
Right. And I mean, TJ Hawkinson and Josh Oliver are not old, to be clear, but they have been around for a while, and the Vikings are not going to want them in on every snap. They're going to want to be able to rotate those guys with someone reliably, at least a third reliable guy, if not also a fourth, if they find one in those two other undrafted free agent guys. I think the big thing, as it will be with pretty much any tight end coming into the league nowadays, is that the blocking needs to take a step up. Both Gavin and Narduzzi said that his run blocking did take a step up in the 2024 season. Pittsburgh got a new tight ends coach, so they were able to build Gavin up a little bit there. But college tight ends just don't block as much as professional tight ends do. And I think that's also a product of high school tight ends not really blocking. They are often just receivers under a different name, or then college tight ends or wide receivers from high school who were just too oversized to play wide receiver at the college level. So there's kind of been this trickle down effect where these guys get to the pros and they have a bit of a learning curve when it comes to their blocking that I think we'll see with him. But it sounds like he might be on slightly better footing than some of the other guys that potentially were looked at.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be interesting, because you're right. I think that is such a big learning curve for so many of these guys. And when you look around the roster and we talk about so few rookies, obviously few draft picks, few rookies maybe potentially making this team, we could take some time to talk about just kind of the roles ahead and who's got maybe the clearest path to contribute. Because obviously Donovan Jackson, you take a first round guard, it's the last kind of spot for them to fill in rebuilding that interior line. I don't think there's any debate that he's going to have the biggest runway per se, to go ahead and contribute right away.
Yeah, Jackson feels most primed to be like a starter as a rookie, I would say. Obviously, like you mentioned at the top, there will be like a competition there, some talk of competition between him and Blake Brandel. We'll see how serious that is throughout the spring and then into the fall. I think Ty Felton is kind of in the same boat almost that Bartholomew is, where like he could be the wide receiver 3. Obviously, Jalen Naylor was in that role last year. It just kind of depends on if they think like the A traits that Ty Felton has, which is the big one that we know they've talked about, is speed, fast guy. Like if they think that outweighs Naylor just having like a little bit more experience, obviously in this offense, but then just in the league as a whole as well. So I'll be interested about that. What do you think about like Ty Ingram Dawkins' kind of potential to play and break in at the defensive tackle spot?
Yeah, he's interesting because he strikes me as kind of a Jihad Ward type, just that really big defensive end that you look at and go, well, you're not fast enough to play outside all the time, and you're not big enough to play inside all the time. Yet he somehow, Brian Flores somehow makes it work, and so did Jihad, in terms of moving around, being an interior rusher with Pat Jones, also playing rundown snaps on the edge when you're not putting him there on 3rd and long, but you're putting him there on 1st and 10 and 2nd and 8 or whatever, and it worked for them. Ingram Dawkins has a similar profile. It's just that tweener, and obviously he might even be a better athlete than Jihad was coming out. I'm not sure about Jihad's numbers, but Ty Ingram Dawkins was one of the stars of the combine because of what he did. He just didn't have the production, and so the Vikings had this vision of somebody who can be greater than the sum of the parts currently that he's put together. And so I think this D-line looks pretty stacked on paper. Like if you're just saying, okay, these guys are all going to stay healthy. If you've got Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, and Harrison Phillips as your interior, and you've got Dallas Turner on the bench, you've got Jalen Redmond on the bench, If Levi Drake Rodriguez or Taki Taimani can develop into a good rotational guy, you've got those guys. So we haven't even mentioned Ingram Dawkins yet. So it is a loaded group that if enough things happen, I could see him getting a redshirt year where the coaching staff's answering questions come December about, well, don't worry about it. He's just part of a loaded team kind of thing, and trying to quell concerns because he hasn't seen the field much, and it might have nothing to do with Ty. Or I could see him usurping people and taking these strides forward and becoming a guy who's, no, you know what, we got to get him in on 3rd and long because he's showing some good interior pass rush or whatever. So, or somebody gets hurt because this is an older defensive line. And even Harrison Phillips is now 29, almost 30, I think. So this is just a group that anything can kind of happen. And they're obviously adding depth like anything could happen. And he's somebody that I wouldn't be shocked either way. If guys stay healthy enough, he doesn't have a role or he does emerge for any number of reasons. So that's an interesting group because it's loaded with talent. And I know you haven't been here all 3 years, Emily, but for Flores, but it's certainly the best group that Flores has had just on paper when you look at both the edge rushers and that interior line.
Yeah, I mean, I think we said it when we did our post-draft pod, but like he ended up being the versatile defender draft pick for the Vikings this year. And so like, yes, that's a long list of names ahead of him and around him. And we know how often things are switched around under Flores, but like the fact that he can play all across that line and you know, there's a lot of tape of him kind of audibling out of stuff and being able to move around based on what he's seeing the offense presenting and doing so super quick. So I don't know, like that could end up being like the surprise, not like surprise, but just the one that maybe we weren't as sure about. And then in the season, we get to like week 6 or 7 and we're like, oh, Ty Ingram Dawkins has more snaps than we would have thought he was going to have.
Yeah, and these things always reveal themselves, much even to coaches sometimes in games where, yeah, like Jalen Redmond had moments in camp. He also got kicked out of the camp practice last year, and to the point where you're thinking, is this guy who's an XFL guy, like, is he going to make the team? And here he ends up earning the coach's trust so much that by the end of the year, he's got a consistent role on this team. So these things reveal themselves slowly to the public, but sometimes even to coaches who tell you in an honest moment, we don't know until we get them in games how it's really going to go, which oftentimes leads them to making conservative decisions and keeping veterans in over younger guys who might have better upside and so forth. So yeah, it's tough to kind of predict these things, but when you look at just the positions and you kind of evaluate where the opportunity might be, I think the 3 we mentioned, Ty Felton, Ty Ingram Dawkins, and Donovan Jackson, it's kind of obvious to start at the top of the draft, but those 3 have pretty good opportunity. And it feels like the Vikings the front office drafted to match kind of the opportunity of the roster pretty well and the need of the roster. As much as they like to talk about impact over need and all these things, they seem to align their picks with their needs pretty well.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and throw Kobe King in the mix and talk about him for a second too, since we've touched on all the other draft picks. And just the linebacker room, I think, is again interesting for all of the reasons we just talked about with the defensive line, where there's so much shifting around and guys playing in different positions. But I think he's a guy that you heard from to get today again as well. What's your read on how involved he might get to be on defense? Because I think on special teams he will be involved.
Yeah, and they throw a lot at those guys. A guy like him who plays inside linebacker, so he's doing some of the communication out there at rookie minicamp right now after just getting the playbook not too long ago. So they kind of throw a lot at him to see what he can handle mentally, and how he checks out with the coaching staff will determine how much they want to give him moving forward. But certainly he said all the right things, called himself an attacker and somebody who really shows himself well once you get the pads on. And it's really tough for football players, especially inside linebackers and defenders, to show much when you don't have pads on. But he's somebody that when you look at this roster, much like we talked about with the other guys, Camus Grugier-Hill ended up leaving. They bring in Eric Wilson, the former Viking player who went to Green Bay and then came back. So they kind of go 1 for 1 there on veteran special teamer. And then they keep Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman in their starting roles. There's not a whole lot there for a guy like Kobe King. He's going to have to cut his teeth on special teams. He's going to have to really earn kind of a background quiet role this year, barring some kind of injury, obviously. But I feel like the guy you wrote about, Gavin Bartholomew, has a much clearer kind of role to being seizing those Johnny Munt number 3 kind of snaps than a guy like Kobe King, who, let's face it, you keep Josh Metellus, you extend Theo Jackson. These are guys who play linebacker roles as well in the very often used dime packages and these sub packages that Brian Flores likes to use. So I don't know how much there's going to be for a guy like King. And it's going to have to probably come on special teams, where we all know anybody can kind of pop up and suddenly you look up and Trent Sherfield is a special teams hero midway through the year. So those opportunities are always there, but defensively, it's going to be a tough climb. It's not like even when Ivan Pace was earning his role, because that was a spot where we're thinking, okay, it's a competition with Brian Asamoah, and there seems to be some real kind of role available there. Not so much this time around.
Yeah, I wonder how much of it is going to be kind of like a long game with him, where like the communication part, the fact that he's playing that role now in rookie minicamp is interesting to me. I believe he did the green dotting for Penn State last year, which is the in-helmet comms that has obviously been around the NFL for a long time, but was just implemented at the NCAA level last year. It's pretty typical for a linebacker to have that role because they're in that center of the defense and can see everything and all of that. But I think there are probably few guys who are truly have the wherewithal to be that type of communicator in game, like where you're both communicating with the coaches and with your teammates and having to manage what your own role is and all of that. So I'm curious, how much of his drafting and that decision with him is a long game for, 4 years from now, if he's built up into some more playing time and they're getting into a second contract, is he the guy that takes over for whoever it is they have doing it now? I'm not sure.
Yeah, potentially too. And we don't have their internal draft profile on Kobe King. And you see clips of Howie Roseman telling his scouts before the Eagles draft of, look, day 3, we're swinging for upside. If we can get 2 starters out of these 7 late round picks, that's what we're going for. Not every team does that. Some teams go in there and say, you know what, we're going to take the safe day 3 special teamer because we think that's what our roster needs. Right. And if they view Kobe like that, then he might be viewed as a replacement for Eric Wilson next year. It's okay, develop now behind the scenes, become a good special teamer, so then we have a cheap special teamer available to us for the next 3 or 4 years after this, or 2, I guess it'd be 3 years on the rookie deal. So, who knows kind of what they view him as. I don't recall anybody after the draft really saying that, yeah, we view this guy as a starter, because they said that last year about Michael Juergens, the 7th round center, where they said, right, no, we view this guy as having a starter possibility. And I might be doing Kobe wrong by forgetting somebody with the Vikings mentioning that. I'm not saying they don't, but I'm also saying it's possible that they just view him as, hey, you're going to be a depth piece. We want you to be a smart, solid player for us, because we need more of those under cheap draft control contracts than we currently have.
For sure. Well, do we have any other thoughts to wrap up rookie minicamp, Andrew?
I don't think we do, Emily. How was your first NFL rookie camp experience? Because
I know my rookie minicamp.
Yeah, they slow roll it. It's a slow start to camp. I was telling you last year, the vibes really picked up at OTAs when all the offensive linemen dressed up as Justin Jefferson.
Incredible.
So they do pick up the bits. They do pick up the fun. This was kind of a slow kind of start to the whole business of the offseason.
Yeah, well, it's also such a change from in season when we see 15 minutes of practice and we're walking up and I was like, so are we up here for the whole hour and a half that's on the schedule? And you're like, yep, did you bring the sunscreen? And I did not, but luckily I was wearing this, so I was pretty protected. But yeah, I mean, I think camp season is fun. It was always fun at the college level, the off season stuff, because I think guys are just a little looser, more willing to do funny stuff like that than they maybe are in season, unless it's a season like last year where you win an unexpected 14 games and every time we're in the locker room is kind of like a party and guys are dunking basketballs and stuff and hoops. But yeah, it was good, and I will bring my sunscreen next time, I think.
That's the lesson for OTAs. You got to check that down. Check the tape figure out where you left it, how did I forget it, and then make sure you make that correction for next time. Yeah.
For sure. Well, we will have even more written coverage from Rookie Minicamp today and just about the rookies in general online at thestartribune.com. Andrew has a couple pieces. I have the piece on Gavin Bartholomew. We'll definitely have even more coverage of OTAs over the next few weeks and into June. But thank you guys for listening to the podcast, and we'll be back with you soon.